Okay, so having covered points of domination, what we need to talk about is how we're going to get into the room and the two methods that I'm going to primarily teach you. And what I'm going to primarily teach you right now is doing this, firstly, the method as a number one man, and then we're going to add two man to it, etc. Okay? Alright, so the first method we're going to teach, we're going to talk about an open doorway, and we're going to talk about diminishing sectors. So, what we want to do is we want to see as much of the room as possible before we go in it. If I'm approaching the door from the left hand side and the door's open, then obviously I can't get across to the other side anyway without diminishing the room. Diminishing is my word, diminishing sectors is in terms of, it's basically the old word pieing the room, right? What I want to make sure is that I don't go in with my back to anything I haven't covered as much as I possibly can. Now what I will show you is the reason I have this broomstick here is if I'm standing here and I lay my broomstick along here, and you don't want to be leaning on the wall, you want to be a little bit away from the wall, but there's nothing to stop you leaning in, okay, to get a good view. And if I look that way, depending how long the room is and depending what furniture there may or may not be in there, I can probably see that way and probably see everything but 5 to 10% of that corner. So I'm seeing it kind of as much as I possibly can of that way. Bearing in mind, depending what the tactical situation is, most people are going to be like usually in the middle of a room, right, in the main living area of a room. If now we've lost tactical surprise or whatever, now they might well be in those corners. So I can see that way mostly, maybe without 5-10% of this near right corner. If I'm on the other side of the door here and I do the same thing and I lean in and I get a good eyeball that way, then similarly I can see most of what's down here, except maybe not all the way into this near left corner. The way the diminishing sectors thing works is, as the number one guy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the diminishing method to see as much of the room as I can before I enter the room. Also, as the number one guy, it's up to me whether ultimately I do enter the room. So what this method gives me also is the ability to back up if necessary. The number one guy's got to make that call. If he's coming up on the room and he realizes there's a whole bunch of stuff in there or whatever, he doesn't necessarily want to go in there, then he's going to, he can obviously make a plan to back away from it, right? Like I keep saying, if he decides to go into the room, everyone's got to go with him. But if he decides not to go into the room, he can back away from it. It depends exactly what the tactical situation is at this point. Whether the enemy's alerted, whether the enemy's not alerted. What we've got here also is this is a soft wall scenario. So all this is giving us is concealment as we move up. It's giving us concealment, but it's not giving us hard cover. So if I'm the number one guy, I realize I'm filming this and I'm carrying a broomstick. That's hilarious on the internet, right? Yeah. But I'm carrying this for a reason, okay? And the reason is, if I just did this demonstration with a rifle, you probably wouldn't understand what I'm talking about. This is supposed to represent the angles that I'm looking at, right? So when I first come up, I want to be far enough, if this was actually a rifle, I want to be far enough away from the door that I'm not exposing the muzzle of my rifle and I'm not bumping into the wall like I just did, okay? So I want to be back from the door. Then what I can do at this point is I can lean in, and what I'm doing at this point is I'm using this door frame here to see as much down there as possible. Once I've done that, this door frame here is my point of reference. What I want to do is, see the way I kind of adjusted my position? I'm not going to do this like this. That might be the way I came up to it. But what I want to do is I want to adjust my hips in, and then using this is my diminishing, this is my pie. And so what I did is I've got that, and what I'm doing is I'm moving and I'm seeing sectors of the room as I move. You're not jamming your muzzle against the door frame like I'm doing with this broomstick, and I'm going to show you with a rifle in a second. But you're basically, that's what you're looking at, and that's where you don't want to have your body sticking out as much as possible beyond that, as best you can. This drill, this diminishing drill, can be done as fast or as slow as you want to, depending on the tactical situation. This can be a fast diminish, or it can be a slow search. It just ultimately depends on what's going on. The key thing is, if you're going to enter that room, you want to have seen as much of it as possible before you do go in there. You may not even be entering the room. You might be actually, there's hallway techniques I'm going to show you where we're going to go past this room and we're just going to basically be checking it out before we move on down the hallway. So I also want to be far enough back that I don't put, if this was actually the end of my rifle, that I don't put my rifle so it can be seen. I also don't want to be completely up in my sight. I want to break my weapon down so I can actually see what's going on and see what's on the floor a little bit as well. So as I move around, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move and I'm going to come around. Now what I have to do is I don't want to end up in the doorway. What I don't want to do is basically diminish on this door frame so that I'm like this. I don't want to do that, especially because we're going to bring number 2 in a minute. I'm going to show you where number 2 is going to be. So what I want to do is be far enough away as I come around. I have to kind of step away so that, see the way I end up on the far side of the doorway like this? And then what I can do at this point is lean in and get off this door frame here as much into that near left corner as I can. So what I've seen is I've probably seen 90% of the room at this time, depending what furniture's in there that's blocking my view. I've seen 90% of the room. All right, so looking at this, now with a rifle, if I'm the number 1 guy, I'm coming up, I've got my weapon up, I'm actually out of my sling in case I need to do any transitioning or whatever, we talked about this earlier, okay? So I got my weapon up, I'm going to come up, and I need to be far enough back from the doorway. My weapon is up but broken down so I can see what's going on ahead of me. And then what I can do is I can lean in and get as much of a view as possible on the near right corner down there. If I'm then going to start the diminish, then I'm changing over my hips. Like I showed you with the broomstick, it's like if I had a weapon rod extension to my rifle, it would be locked on to this door frame here. So I start to diminish. As I diminish, I'm kind of crabbing over to the other side of the door. I get in here, and then I can lean and see as much as possible on that side of the door. So this is basically diminishing on an open doorway. It allows the number 1 guy to get across from one side to the other, seeing as much as possible of the room, and then ultimately he's got to go into the room, and what we'd have is we'd have the number 2 guy who stayed over on the other side. What we're going to end up with at this point is a crisscross. Alright, so taking the focus away from the number 1 guy, even though that's what we're focusing on right now, just to show you where the number 2 guy would be. This will also explain why we don't want the number 1 guy to just really closely diminish this door frame. We don't want him to closely diminish the door frame and be kind of here. So we've got the number 2 guy here. What we want to do is we want to do a crisscross entry technique. That's what we want to do. Okay. So Johnny Mac. So what happens is I come up on the door, stop short of the door, okay, and I take a look. I'm going to diminish it. Okay, so as I start to move out, what he's going to do, we talked about breaking up, he's going to break up and over and take my spot on the left side of the doorway. So I start to move out, and he can push up a little bit, and he's covering that sector that I'm not looking at anymore. And and I check the far left corner, and now you see what we've got here, guys. We've basically got a crisscross on the doorway. Does that make sense? Right. If I'm going to enter the room now, we need some kind of communication about this. One thing we can do is a muzzle nod, okay? Whatever you want as your kind of communication technique. And so if I'm going to now enter the room, so if I muzzle nod, he will break up. What that is, with him breaking up there, is it's allowing me to pass over in front of him. One of the things we're doing here is a lot of the reason for these entry techniques, and I'll show you when we get onto the step center in a minute, is we are allowing the number 2 the path of least resistance into the room. So as the number 1 guy, I've already checked out as much of the room as I possibly can. What I want to do, because if I'm going to go in now this way from the crisscross, then I've already checked as much of that corner out as I can. He's covering it right now. I mean, things could happen. There could be a doorway there, someone could be hiding in the closet, whatever, and they come out, that kind of thing, right? So he's covering it as much as possible. I've already checked it out. So when I go in this way, then I'm reducing, as I go through the doorway this way, I'm reducing the chances of getting shot in the back of the head from some guy who's in that near right corner down there. Does that make sense? Right? When he comes in, he's got to back me up as quick as possible. Remember what I said, when the number 1 guy goes in the room, the number 2 guy goes in the room, the whole stack's going to go in the room, right? So he breaks up, and then as I go past him, he's almost chopping down with his weapon and driving in right behind me, and he's got the path of least resistance because he's driving straight forwards. Some of the techniques, when we start to get into this, you might confuse the technique a little bit, and what you'll end up doing is you might accidentally end up doing a double button hook. So what does that mean? If I accidentally ended up doing a double button hook, then if I decided that I got all the way around here and I decided I was going to go in the room like this, now he's got a button hook. Now what did I say about the number 1 guy? He's an idiot? No. Okay. I said he's not wrong because that's the way he went, right? But what it's forcing him to do, and this is where I'll say that in terms of the overall principles, he's kind of wrong. Because what it's forcing him to do is it's making the number 2 guy not take the path of least resistance. The number 2 guy has to button hook, which is delaying him covering my other direction. So if my principle is as much as possible, I'll always try and make the number 2 guy take the path of least resistance, then I'm on a bit of a winner, right? Having got to the far side, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to muzzle nod, he's going to break up, and then I'm going to drive forwards through the doorway. And what I want to do is, because I'm going left, I want to do a penetrating step, so I bring my right foot through. I'm not going to pause in the doorway like this, but you can see that I've immediately got that corner. If I have to fire, I can fire, and then I'm going to continue to drive into the room, and then I'm going to spin, turn, and move to my point of domination. And now we're covering across within 1 yard of the muzzle of the other guy. Everybody see that? That is basically the basic version of diminishing sectors. How to get in the room with an open door. Any questions? Okay, this time, guys, we're going to do the diminish, but once we engage the first target, then we're going to immediately enter the room. So hybrid diminish, step center. Previous one, we did diminish, but we continued to diminish even after we engaged the first target. So we engage the second target and then we enter the room. This time, we do the diminish until we get to the first target, and then once we engage the first target, we're immediately going to enter and deal with the target in the corner. Questions?
So follow up on the first target.
Yeah, and we'll follow up on that first target. So because of where I've put that target in the corner, and because we're doing an immediate entry, you won't have an opportunity to engage that corner target from outside like you did last time. Alright? So what it's going to look like in slow time is I'm going to come out on the diminish, I'm going to engage that first target, and then immediately enter with a penetrating step, engage that guy, and then that's my corner, and then move in and re-engage this guy. Okay? Okay guys, so what we're going to do this time is step center from the left side of the door. So the way it's going to pan out is we'll move up to the doorway, we'll do the initial pi, then the diminish to the magical line, then we'll step out, and in this case you're going to get a target. That target is set there, so you shouldn't see it until you step out on the step center. Once you step out on the step center, you'll see it, you'll engage it, and remember, you've got to stop engaging that target when your muzzle breaks the plane of the door. So don't stand here forever. As you step out, engage it as you drive forwards, and then as you get through, now we do a penetrating step, and we've got target in the corner. Engage the target in the corner, and then move to your point of domination.
So you engage target one twice?
Yes, and then re-engage that target as you move back around to your point of domination. Got it? Let's see if I can do it without messing up the demonstration. Stand by for a couple.